Hello, it's me, Mr. Baker, coming at you from a real classroom, so it feels like we're actually here. Today we'll be going over some math of English, so to speak. I don't normally like that, like breaking up sentences into parts and naming the parts and stuff. For me, it was never useful, but for this lesson it is. And if you have ever struggled with run-ons or fragments, or just the construction of a sentence, I believe this will help a lot. So hopefully this helps. All right. All right, run-on sentences, the PowerPoint about run-ons. Get it? Because that's a run-on. Also fragments. Get it? Because that's a fragment. I had fun with these. All right. So what we'll learn today is what is a run-on sentence? How do we identify them? And how do we fix them? I'm going to give a brief overview first because this one can get confusing. If you're someone who takes notes, you really should for this one if you struggle with this concept. Because again, we're talking about the parts of sentences, which can get confusing and messy and mathy. It's like the math of English again. So a comma splice, let me just give some definitions up front to help you out before it gets too technical. A comma splice is a comma incorrectly used in place of a period. It incorrectly separates two independent thoughts. A sentence that uses a comma splice is a type of run-on sentence. This doesn't necessarily mean it's a long sentence. Run-ons can be short. Mr. Baker likes teaching, Mr. Baker likes reading. That is a run-on because you have two independent thoughts that could be separated by a period or a semicolon, but instead you just put a comma, which isn't enough to separate those two things because they're separate. Another type of run-on sentence is called a fused run-on. It's a sentence that uses no punctuation at all. So when you get scared and you just start writing, not thinking before you write, or you write and you try to edit it, but you're not sure where to put the commas or the periods, it gets confusing. You just don't put anything. That's confusing. It's called a fused run-on. It's hard to tell when you do that, where one thought ends and another begins. For example, Daly likes to run, but only when there's no punctuation to stop her from running away with her thoughts. Like when she thinks of something, she most definitely wants it on the page, unedited, because only fascists would want to edit truth, right? 100. So it's when your thoughts run away and you put no punctuation. This I see a lot of, and this can be very hard to read, as you can tell. A fragment sentence is simply one that is incomplete. There's more technical definitions, but this is how I look at it. This doesn't necessarily mean it's a short sentence. A fragment can be long. Here's an example. Because of the fact that Gerlene knew the movie started at midnight, and because of the fact that she also knew she had a test in the morning, period. We're missing something here. The thought isn't complete. A fragment can also be as simple as a simple sentence that's missing a verb, for example. Or something like this. That being said, complete that thought, right? That thought cannot stand alone. Whether it's a long thought that can't stand alone or a short thought that can't stand alone. It's a fragment. You're not done. I see a lot of these too. Now, this is tricky because fragments are used a lot by authors. I read Stephen King, I read J.K. Rowling. I love them. And they use a ton of fragments, but you don't even know it because it flows so well. And it's usually to accentuate a point or to create suspense. So when it's intentional, a fragment can be good. But in the writing that I read, it's usually not intentional, and it's considered informal anyways. I don't mind it occasionally, again, if it's very intentional. I like creative writing, so if you do it here and there and it's on purpose, that's okay. So here are some definitions before we get started, but let's rewind. Let's go back and start to talk about the parts of a sentence so this starts to make more sense. So a clause. Now, just to be clear, when I started teaching, I didn't know the math of English. A lot of these words confused me. This is embarrassing, but I'll share this with you. But when I started teaching at a college level, like I had my master's degree in writing, I didn't really know what a preposition was. I didn't know it I still don't know a lot of the phrases that I read in books that I teach from because I don't learn that way with all these different phrases. A clause and a sentence always confuse me because I'm like, can't those be the same things? They can. So let's break up the distinction here. So a clause is a group of words containing a subject, so what the sentence is about or who the sentence is about, and a predicate, which is a part of the clause that contains the verb. So a verb plus like an object, for example, or a verb, the action word, and stating something about what the subject is doing. So Bernadette walks home. You have your subject, it's about Bernadette. She walks home. Walks is the verb, walks home is the predicate. It's a verb phrase. That together is a clause. And when it stands alone like this, you can also call it a sentence. So it gets confusing. A sentence, however, can be made up of multiple clauses. Bernadette walks home, but Peter walks to the park. You have two separate clauses here, but it's together, they form a full sentence. So hopefully that helps a little. A sentence can be made up of one clause, as seen in the first example. In this case, a sentence and an independent clause. A clause that can stand alone are interchangeable. So again, this can be called a sentence or a clause. This is a sentence made up of two clauses. Clauses are smaller parts of sentences, essentially. This will help. This all will come together at some point here, I promise. So what is an independent clause? It's a clause that can stand alone. Like we saw, Bernadette walks home. It had a subject, it had a verb, and it completed a thought. So Spider-Man pushed the lawnmower. Black Widow picked the tulips. Loki painted the wall. I realize you probably don't write like this, but I'm just using these simple examples to highlight the point, because that's how I like to learn. I don't like super complex examples from like Harvard professors, because they just rattle off all these words and I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you're saying, bro. So these are just simple. You get the idea, hopefully. A sentence can have more than one independent clause. Spider-Man pushed the lawnmower, Black Widow picked the tulips, and Loki painted the wall. These are three thoughts that can stand alone and be their own sentence, or you can put them all together and also be a sentence. So a sentence with three clauses here. Does that make sense? Good. I'm assuming you're nodding or falling asleep. Sorry. I'll try to change my voice a little bit here and there and make it up and down a little bit, fluctuate so that it wakes you up. All right. Dependent clauses, on the other hand, is a clause that can't stand alone. But if it is standing alone, you put a period at the end of it, it's called a fragment. After he went to the store, because the ball hit his head, even if it was just one murder, these sentences can't stand alone. They're dependent clauses. So take out those underlined words and look at what happens. So he went to the store, the ball hit his head. It was just one murder. So those are independent clauses. But when you add these dependent words here, these subordinate words, these subordinate conjunctions, they're called many things. After, because, and even if, it makes the whole thing dependent on something else. You need to pair it with an independent clause to make it a complete sentence. So after he went to the store, he went to the movie theater. Because the ball hit his head, Milo had a minor concussion. Even if it was just one murder, it was still considered illegal. Now, those second clauses are all independent. They stand alone and they hold up the dependent clause. And it creates what's called a complex sentence. We're learning, right? Does this feel good? Hopefully it does. So if you have a dependent clause, it stands alone, it's called a fragment. If you pair it with an independent clause, it is a complex sentence, or it's a sentence that works. That's good. Good sentence. Happy sentence. Now, words like the subordinate dependent indicators or subordinating conjunctions, whatever you want to call them, they always indicate that it's a dependent clause, just like we saw the underlined words before. So if you see these words, take a picture, try to remember this. Whatever, you don't have to memorize what they're called, like relative pronouns or subordinate. You don't need to know that. But if you see these words, especially if they're starting a sentence, you're definitely starting a dependent clause, and you need to pair it with an independent clause. Now, you don't need to memorize sentence types, but your teachers are going to talk about sentence variety. So let me go over those really quick. A simple sentence is simply one independent clause. Bernadette walks home. That's one independent clause that stands alone, and it's also, you can call that a simple sentence. A compound sentence is when you have two independent clauses. We'll be dealing with those today. A complex sentence is when you have one independent clause plus at least one dependent clause. The independent clause holds up the dependent clause or dependent clauses. And then a complex compound sentence, there's two independent clauses plus at least one dependent clause. Again, I'm not someone who needs to know all these terms, but you need to understand the idea. You can call them whatever you want. You can make up words for all I care. I'm not going to quiz you on the names per se, a little bit on the run-on quiz, actually. So a little bit on this upcoming quiz, but not too much. But you need to understand these concepts, and that all sentences should have at least one independent clause to hold up the dependent clauses. That's what I really want you to learn. English teachers talk about sentence variety Because when you don't have, like, imagine an entire, 5-page essay made up of just simple sentences. I walked to the store. I like chicken. School is fun. English class sucks. I like math. It's going to sound like one note over and over again when you're reading it in your head, right? So when your reader is reading that, it's going to be like a song with one note. And some of you like that kind of music. A lot of dance music, I feel like, is just one note played 1,000 times, and then the DJ gets rich and famous somehow. I don't understand it, but there you go. I'm trying to be youthy. But you do need an independent clause to hold these up, and you do want sentence variety. You want to mix up your sentences. Now, if you really struggle with writing, like if writing essays is really, really, really hard for you, have a draft, like write your rough draft, just go for it. Just write your first draft. Don't think about your teacher, just write, have fun, get into the subject. Then when you go back and start editing, if you really need to, break it up into simple sentences. Where do the periods go? Where do the commas go? And make it as simple as possible. And then you can learn, like with this lesson, hopefully we'll teach you some other ways to mix up sentences a little bit by using semicolons, colons, conjunctions, things like that. And you can add sentence variety so you don't have that one note thing going on. But if you really, really struggle with writing, then your first edit of your first draft could be just simple sentences all the way through. That's fine. And then you're really identifying where your independent clauses are too. So WTF is a run-on. What is it? It's two or more independent clauses smashed together using incorrect punctuation, usually a comma. I like cake, Sheila likes brownies. Or no punctuation at all. I like cake, Sheila likes brownies. It's hard to say. Again, I see both. And I'm not the kind of English teacher that, I'm not trying to be cool or whatever. I'm just not, if I see a couple comma splices, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to get an F. I know some of those teachers that does exist. So you want to know this stuff. But I just don't, because I understand we make mistakes sometimes. But if your whole essay, it builds up. If your whole essay is made up of comma splices, fragment sentences, fused run-ons where there's just no punctuation, and sometimes I'll see full paragraphs with no punctuation, and I am lost. Misspellings, that can really add up to make a very confusing essay. And that's really what the grade is representing. It's not representing anything personal. It's just saying, hey, to what degree can I get what you're saying on my first read through your essay? And if I get it right away, if it's formal, if you follow the instructions and it looks nice, it'll probably be a passing grade at least a C. But if it's something where I have to read 3 or 4 times and I'm still just like, I'm really trying to understand your message here, but I just can't, then that's when it gets into not passing territory. All right. So how do we fix run-on sentences? With a period, semicolon or colon, and coordinating conjunctions. So these are formal ways to fix it. In informal writing, there are other ways too, but I think these are the kind of like college English class ways to fix things. Okay, period. That's how people spell it now, yeah? Period. I don't know why it's doing this, but she is chill, he is chill, they should wed. Right? Again, if you text or email like this, I don't care as long as I understand what you mean. But in a formal essay, I do care. And you do, when you're emailing instructors, you do want to default to formality as well. Some of them really care, so better to err on that side. An easy fix here would be there's 3 independent thoughts. She is chill, he is chill, they should wed. Period, period, period. You have your 3 independent thoughts here. They can all stand alone. You're good. Now, if that's one note, you need sentence variety eventually, but that can come later in a different draft. Clowns are scary, kids are scary. Those are 2 independent thoughts. They can stand alone. Period. You do not want a comma or else it's a comma splice. Not enough of a pause to break these 2 independent thoughts up. You lied to me. You said my father is my father, but my uncle is my father. My father is my uncle. If any of you are Arrested Development fans, let's be friends. That this is a quote from there, and not a great example for this, but I was having fun. You lied to me, period. You said my father was my father, comma, but my uncle is my father, period. My father is my uncle. You're breaking these up. I mean, the middle one there is a compound sentence. So bad example for this maybe, but put periods in. There you go. Or exclamation point. The bones are the skeleton's money. In our world, bones equals dollars. They're coming out tonight to get their bones from you. This is from the show I Think You Should Leave. If you've seen this, we're best friends, but most people haven't. So anyways, random, funny. The bones are skeletons' money, period. In our world, bones equal dollars, period. They're coming out tonight to get their bones from you, period. Just look for the where to put periods, and it fixes these things usually. Not always, but usually. So easy fix. This shouldn't be too new of a thought. Semicolons. Now, I talk about how I like semicolons and colons. However, this doesn't mean you should use them in every sentence. Use them sparingly. They are great. They're great tools. When you want to show the relationship between two independent clauses. So the two independent clauses have a bit of a crush on each other and want to be together and not let periods separate them. So each clause stands on its own. So you can also use a period if you don't want to show the relationship between the two. We'll look at examples, but complete sentence can stand alone, semicolon, and then another complete sentence. So two complete sentences that can stand alone on either side of the semicolon in formal writing. And it's just showing that both are related to each other. They're both connected. And it can be a compound sentence on this side and a complex sentence on the other side. It could be two simple sentences, whatever. As long as they're both complete, emphasis on the complete sentence thing on both sides, you're good with a semicolon. And that's just, instead of a period, you're just showing that these are connected. I'm repeating myself a lot because I want you to get this, because I teach this every semester and then people use it incorrectly. So here you go. Clowns are scary, kids are scary. It's two simple sentences. You lied to me, you said my father was my uncle, but my uncle's my father is my uncle. You could put one there. You have your compound sentence and you have your simple sentence. They're both complete on either side, and I'm just showing you that these two are connected. And then this one, the bones of the skeleton's money, simple sentence. In our world, bones equal dollars. A simple sentence with like I forgot what this is called. I forgot all the terms, but there you go. This can break them up and show that they're connected. Now, semicolons can be used for other things, but in formal writing, you're just showing the relationship between two complete sentences. There are a couple exceptions, and I'll tell you these, not to confuse you, but hopefully this helps. Punctuation is all about communicating clearly and effectively. If I say my favorite cities in the world are Fresno, California, that's where I live, San Diego, California, London, England, and Paris, France. Think about what that sentence looks like in writing. It sounds fine, but when I'm writing it out, it's a lot of commas. My favorite cities in the world are Fresno, comma, California, comma, Paris, comma, France, comma, London, comma, England, period, whatever. Too many commas. So you can use a semicolon to break those up. Break up the separate. So Fresno, comma, California, semicolon, Paris, comma, France, semicolon, to break those up just for order and structure. The way I give notes, now I know the way you see it is different than how I write it. And so because of that, when I give you notes on like an essay, for example, a lot of times I'll break up those notes with semicolons. It's very informal. And I'm doing that because I've seen how you view it on your end. On my end, it looks like a bullet point list. It's very organized. I think the way it translates, though, to students is that it looks like a paragraph. And if I don't have some sort of break in between my separate notes, it can look really confusing. So I use it to break it up informally. So again, I just want to make those clarifications. Don't use them that way, because again, I see this. I talk about this, and then everyone has like, instead of periods or commas, it's just all semicolons. It's so confusing. All right, a colon is different with two little dots. Used to prepare the reader for an extension of a complete sentence. The second part is a direct extension of the first part. The first part must be a complete sentence, stand on its own. Expectation, fulfillment. So the other one had arrows moving both ways to show the relationship between the two sides, the two complete thoughts, or two complete sentences. For a colon, it's moving this direction. You're creating expectation on one side and then fulfilling it on the other. So complete sentence, complete sentence. So in formal writing, you always start with the complete sentence. It's building up to something. Then you have your colon. Then you have anything on the other side. Colons are fun because on the other side, you can just, it's the Wild West. You could do whatever you want. You have your lists, which are usually, when you think of colon, you might think about a shopping list. A complete sentence, a fragment sentence over here, a quote. You can do anything. If you're building up to a quote, if I just say, John says, that's my signal phrase before a quote. John says, comma, that's fine. The comma's fine. If I say, Mr. Baker taught me something today that changed my whole life, you'd want to do a colon. You have a longer signal phrase, colon, and then your quotation mark. You can have a fragment. You're building up to something. You're creating expectation, and then you fulfill it on the other side, kind of as an emphasis. I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, I have examples on the next page. Thank goodness, all right. The two of them had met on a balcony in the rain and both knew what time it was. Time for a tickle fight. John coughed out his final words after the zombie ate his face. Don't forget to charge my crystals during the full moon. The code finally materialized, and Sam's eyes went wide when she saw her favorite number, 6666666. You're building up to something, you're creating expectation, and then you fulfill it. A lot of you write like this, but then you create like a fragment on the other end. And that can sometimes work, but it's usually not done very well, to be honest. You're building up expectation. You're telling me a story, and then you want to answer it with one word, and you get confused by that. So a colon can do that. Colons you really don't want to use that much. These use very sparingly. But if you read your essay out loud when you're reading back to yourself, if you do multiple drafts, which you should for your sake, then you will hear it. You'll hear the buildup. You'll want a colon and then answer it. This is great for thesis statements. My favorite, I don't know, the one we did, for example, with the person who inspires me the most is my dad. Or my dad inspires me for many reasons, colon. And then you list those reasons. That's great for a thesis statement. Fanboys words. So this is another fix for run-ons. You have these are conjunctions that connect two independent clauses, which allow for your comma splice. So you can do your comma, but then just add one of these words: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. You've probably heard of this before. That's why I'm kind of rattling them off. But if not, focus on this. These words can connect two independent thoughts instead of just using a comma. So, I guess I didn't have examples. Those were the examples. I was late, for I had lost my homework. So if you just put a comma, I was late, I had lost my homework. That's a comma splice. The for fixes it. I like chicken, and Sherry likes steak. So for these, and but are the most common ones. I'd love if you tried to use nor. That was hard for me to even come up with. Nora hates rap, nor does she like dance. Like, I don't use nor ever. Yet I hardly ever use. So is a very popular one too, but these fix it. The easy fixes, just add these after a comma. Normally, here's when we do a worksheet in class, but I'll have some online stuff for you, at least the quiz. But yeah, there you go. In short, read out loud. Here's one suggestion. Look at longer sentences and see how many thoughts you are conveying. Look at punctuation. Writing is boring, but thinking is fun. I write what I'm thinking, and I don't stop until my hand gets tired, and I believe that homework is boring too. Fused run-on. It's hard to tell where one thought begins and another ends and all that. It gets confusing. So you could try to fix it with just periods. Writing is boring. Thinking is fun. I write what I'm thinking. I don't stop until my hand gets tired. I believe that homework is boring too. So it's very robotic, and it's one note, and it's bad for sentence variety. And you do want to fix that, but it's a start. It can help you. You can show where your thoughts are, independent thoughts are at least. Writing is boring, comma, but thinking is fun. So it's your fanboy's word, your conjunction. I write what I'm thinking, and another conjunction. I don't stop until my hand gets tired, semicolon. I believe that homework is boring too. Right? Adds a little sentence variety, mixing it up a bit. Those actually work where they are. And so I know I'm going through this quickly. I know that one PowerPoint's not going to fix this problem. I know it's a difficult problem, but I do think if you pay attention and you ask me questions if I wasn't clear about something and you practice these things, it's something that's actually pretty easy. And it's another thing, kind of like thesis statements, that I want to demystify. People like in my classes, I say run-ons and everyone's like, or I say fragments and they're like, I'm tired of hearing this, or comma splice. And it's frustrating and it's annoying, I get that, but hopefully this is helping you out and making it much less scary. But for this one, I kind of do have to go through all those terms to make it less scary, I think. So hopefully that helps. Here's the overview again. You have access to this. You can read this on your own time, but I wanted to put it at the beginning and end just to kind of sum it up, because I know this might take a few run-throughs to understand. So, yeah, hope that helps. Let me know if you have questions. See you next time. Bye.